Welcome to Dig on America, where we speak truth to power.
As we get now, this one I will say is about it's just a smidge longer than normal, but not too bad. So if you guys would like to interject, you may do so. Just yell out pause.
So many
sorry,
times.
my stream is a little bit slow right now, so hopefully this goes fine. All right.
Oh my gosh.
This week we will dive into the topic of how we got to Citizens United in the topic of campaign finance reform. So, campaign finance regulation has a long history in the United States, beginning even before the American independence. After George Washington bought $195 worth of punch and hard cider for friends prior to an election in 1757. What a party that must have been. Ain't no party like a Whig party, because a Whig party don't stop. A law was passed prohibiting candidates from giving voters money for meat, drink, or entertainment or any gift, reward, or entertainment in order to be elected. Those fucking killjoys. Fundraising and campaigning as we know it began with Andrew Jackson, the first candidate for president without a prestigious family background, extensive education, or personal wealth. When Jackson ran in 1828, he became the first organized campaigner to harness the power of the media, forming a grassroots movement that enlisted local support like no candidate ever before. Jackson did not seek financial support on his own behalf, though he was an early practitioner of rewarding those loyalists with federal positions. Shame. Shame. The 1860s. Yes, it is. The 1860s marked the first time the federal government really tried to.
And that's all we have for the dig this week. Man, too bad his internet went out.
Jeez. I can fill in for Dutch on this part. 1867, a law prohibited federal officers from requesting contributions from Navy yard workers. That was the first. That was the first instance of campaign finance law in somewhat modern American history. We'll wait for Dutch to come back, but I had.
No, you don't. No, you don't. Just go.
No, you're good.
All right. It wasn't until the Tillman Act of 1907 when the first real campaign finance reform was passed by Congress. It prevented federally chartered corporations and banks from contributing to election campaigns on any level, and any corporation from contributing to presidential or congressional campaigns.
Now, why is that bad, Tim?
Because corporations and businesses influencing political campaigns, man, that nothing could go wrong there.
What's the worst that could happen? Are you good, Dutch, or are you swapping out?
Interest of since I only got through a couple of we'll pick it up with where I was at before. So we just talked about Andrew Jackson. So the 1860s marked the first time the federal government really tried to regulate campaign finance by passing the Naval Appropriations Bill, making it illegal for officials to solicit naval yard workers for money. This was expanded in 1883 when the Pendleton Act was passed, making it illegal for officials to solicit contributions from any civil workers or award positions on anything but merit. Prior to this, most who worked in government were expected to make contributions to keep their jobs. In 1896, in the 1896 election, William McKinley raised a then colossal $16 million in contributions for his campaign. What? Additionally, both McKinley and his opponent, William Jennings Bryan, were plagued with accusations of bribery and unethical behavior in the campaign.
Boss, y'all want to know why bribery is illegal?
Because it's a bribe.
Because it works.
McKinley's chief fundraiser, playing on Mikey's comment there, courted corporations with promises of a big business agenda. Sound familiar? And famously exclaimed, "There are two things important in politics. The first is money, and I can't remember what the second one is." Well, it's actually culture wars. But when the public learned of these practices, when the public learned of this, there was outrage, and Americans began to demand campaign finance regulation. In 1905, President Roosevelt, Theodore, called for vigorous measures to eradicate this political corruption, saying, quote, contributions by corporations to any, or I'll say it like him, contributions to corporations by any political committee or for any political purpose should be forbidden by law. This led to the
How you know he sound like that?
He's my relative.
I say it no more. I say it.
It didn't sound that southern, did it? So this led to the Tillman Act 2 years later, which made contributions to federal candidates by both corporations and national banks illegal. The act was ineffective, however, as the government could not find an effective way to enforce it. A few years after that, the Federal Corrupt Practices Act was passed, which required federal candidates to disclose their finances and set up expenditure limits. However, the Roaring 20s saw the Supreme Court roar back at this act in Newberry versus the United States, ruling that the Federal Corrupt Practices Act was unconstitutional because the Constitution does not grant Congress the authority to regulate political parties, and that was the role of the media to propagate anything that would help Americans by framing it as a Red Scare. Oh, wait, sorry, actually isn't true, but they still did that. Anyways, spending limits were no longer required in congressional elections. Thus, Congress amended the act to include a ban on any corporate contribution to a federal campaign, forcing candidates to disclose the source of any contribution greater than $50 and required campaigns to create finance reports. Side note, this would not be enforced for 3 decades. In the 1930s, a series of reforms were passed banning public utility companies and any federal employee from contributions or involvement in campaigns. This was expanded in the 40s to stop unions from supporting campaigns with the Smith-Connolly Act. Prior to this, unions had been using dues as political donations. Shortly thereafter, the Taft-Hartley Act banned corporations and unions from making even personal donations towards federal general elections, but did not ban unions from partnering with the mob to murder any future leaders. All of this led to the 1971 Federal Election Campaign Act, or FECA, which initiated sweeping reforms. How do they reform sweeping?
Pause.
The vacuum cleaner? Yes, pause.
What was FECA? What does that stand for?
Federal Election Campaign Act of 1971.
And legislation. So fecal. Got it.
Yes, FECA. Yeah. And these sweeping reforms required full reporting of contributions to federal elections. Revelations of campaign finance abuses in the 1972 election were uncovered in the Watergate scandal, spurring a rewrite of FECA in 1974 when I was born. These amendments created the Federal Election Commission, or FEC, and enacted stricter limits on election contributions and expenditures.
Pause. The FEC is the worst fucking organization.
You're biased, though. You hate them.
Oh, they're the worst. I mean, I'm sure you're going to go through how they get their ass kicked in every court case, but yes, they're the worst.
Enter Buckley versus Vallejo, the court case, which challenged these new amendments. And although Vallejo, and although Buckley versus Vallejo lost at the state and district level, they lost twice. Ultimately, a conglomerate of banks and corporations pushed the case all the way to the Supreme Court on the grounds that they violated the First Amendment guarantees of free speech. America. The court introduced the concept that spending money was a form of unrestricted political speech and overturned limits on campaign expenditures, though they did uphold the contribution limits for now. This all leads us to the introduction of so-called soft money. This is money that ideally can be used by Mike Lindell to use as filler in his pillows. Oh, that's not actually true, but anyway. In 1979,
Allegedly.
Pause.
Those are actually some really terrible pillows.
Hey,
Like,
they're filled with white tears. So.
Can I tell you something sad?
Costco.
I have 2 of them, and they're my favorite pillow.
Of course
they really
you
are.
do.
But
Of
I've had
course
them
you
for like
do.
7 years, and now
What?
I have this conundrum because like
Dutch.
I want to buy another one, but I can't
Dutch.
because he's a crazy person. I am
Dutch.
allowed
You
to
just
like.
go to your MAGA rallies.
Oh my god!
No,
I am
no, no, no,
allowed
no.
to like a pillow.
Everyone stop. Dutch, it has nothing to do with you liking the damn pillow by the obvious white supremacists. The problem is you haven't thrown away a pillow in 7 years. Bro, 3 years max. Rotate them bad
No,
boys. It's
I've
all
had 'em
kinds
for-
of stuff.
I've had-
It's the
I've had 'em for a while.
principalities, man. Like Big
Man, that
Worm.
pillow-
Someone needs to
I
keep.
went out and
Someone
I
needs to
bought-
keep these mattress places.
I went out and I
in-
bought this one, which is also a foam pillow because I won't buy his.
Your
That pillow
pillow
sucks
about
compared to the
your
old one.
pillow about this thick, and for you audio people, I'm holding up 3 sheets of paper. That's as thick as your pillow is right
His
now.
pillow
After
has his-
seven
His
years
pillow
of
has
your
his
big
ear
noggin.
print in it. His
That's
ear
what I'm
print is in that
saying. You got a
pillow, dude.
booty ear groove worked into your damn. Get rid of it, bro. Get
Stop
a new
hating
one.
on my pillows. Anyway, in 1979, as a result of the FEC now enforcing rules, aka law and order, I swear I heard that somewhere before, national and local parties began directly funding, quote, party building, aka expenses that weren't specifically tied to a particular campaign. At the federal level, unlimited donations from corporations and unions, sources that were otherwise prohibited, flowed in at record levels. In 1992, Bush 1 vetoed a bill that would have provided public financing for congressional candidates and did so without asking us to read his lips. But back to pillows. I mean, soft money. Both parties took the raising of soft money to new levels in the 90s. I guess they blew up alongside gangster rap, soliciting donations from corporations that were supposed to be used for party building and using them for whatever the hell they wanted, similar to Kenneth Copeland needing that third jet. This was particularly clear in Bill Clinton's reelection, with big donors being given overnight stays in the Lincoln bedroom and other favors, like personal saxophone lessons from Bill himself.
Oh, shit.
Okay, no evidence there, but I guarantee he did it.
Personal
Congress
sax
didn't-
lessons,
White
huh?
House.
Congress did investigate Clinton, of course, but he was an elite and thus no change in the law. Finally, the 2002 Mccain Feingold Act explicitly prohibited party soft money and imposed disclosure requirements on funding restrictions on, quote, electioneering communications. It also included the stand by your ad clause that requires candidates to state their approval at either the beginning or end of an ad. Let's do Tim's ad. I'm Tim Bristol, and I support this grilled cheese. Of course, this law was whittled away and challenged over time by more and more elites. With the exception of McCain himself, Bernie Sanders, and a couple others, the law had little popularity among corporate lobbyists, PACs, churches, and members of government. And now for the and now for the major upheaval in the terrain of money and politics. The Supreme Court in 2010 ruled 5-4 that corporations may make unlimited expenditures, encouraging votes for or against specific candidates, so long as they're not coordinating with the candidates or parties. The Citizens United decision nullified restrictions on direct corporations that had stood since 1907 at the beginning of the dig. The court's majority claimed donor disclosure would bring transparency to funds and eliminate soft money in lieu of hard money. However, Citizens United helped usher in the era of the super PAC, an explosion in political spending by nonprofits that won't disclose donors, aka dark money. So we got rid of soft money.
It's dark now, huh? Is dark not at his back?
Hey, you got to blame the court.
See,
got rid of soft, and now it's dark. So now it's bad money. Effectively,
now it's bad.
Did
They call it-
they do that on Black Wednesday, on Black Monday too?
they did.
Did they wear black hats and black coats?
They call it big hoss money.
Practice black magic.
Effectively, this decision
Were they
stated
infected with the back plague?
they were. Effectively, the Citizens United decision stated that corporations are people. Oddly, Montana, of all fucking states, put on their Superman cape and blocked the Citizens United decision, citing a unique state history of corruption dating back to copper barons paying off politicians to justify their actions. but this was overturned.
Wait,
a year
wait,
later.
pause. Did you say copper barons?
That's right.
Yes. So
Like dudes who are super mega rich off of copper mines?
yes, and they were paying off politicians in Montana. That's exactly correct.
And pennies.
So they said because they have this unique
Back up this
history
train load
of
of
corruption,
pennies.
yeah, up to your door, because they had this unique history of fraud, they were like, no, this won't work for us. But of course, that was overturned a year later and cemented Citizens United as the law in both federal and state elections. So there is your dig on the birth of Citizens United. We'll go to Lourin on this in a second, but first, because this is your area, Tim,
His
add
real house.
anything else that you think was missed, or elaborate for us, and then we'll go to Lourin.
Okay, so there's two other court cases that are important for campaign finance. One is Mcconnell V Fec, and this one is before Citizens United, where the Supreme Court upheld the ban on soft money used by national party committees. But the justices saw, and this is actually what Justice Stevens wrote, money like water will always find an outlet, and the government is justified in taking steps to prevent loopholes and contribution limits. And the court found that both provisions of upholding bans on contribution limits and soft money were faithfully intended to prevent corruption of party committees. Now, this law also, the court also rejected the argument that Congress exceeded its authority to regulate elections under under Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution. The court did uphold the restrictions on corporations and unions to their use of money for electioneering communication. So before Citizens United, in McConnell versus FEC, the court did uphold the bans that Citizens United
Is that Mitch McConnell?
overturned. Yeah, it was Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell sued the FEC for campaign finance reform, and then he did. And the Citizens United, what it exactly did was it stripped away the limits on electioneering, contribution limits, and expenditure limits by corporations and unions. So while corporations were also prevented from doing this, unions were too, and that was a big thing because giving corporations free speech was a lot bigger than giving unions free speech in political money. Unions are like the lesser organization here, and they got sort of like strangled off by the corporations once they got this freedom. The other important Supreme Court decision was after Citizens United, and this is Mccutcheon versus FEC. This centered around contribution limits imposed on citizens giving to political campaigns. The plaintiffs argued that the limit on contributions to individual candidates and the total aggregate limits were violating their First Amendment rights. And the court upheld the limit on individual candidates, but they threw out the limit on the aggregate total that you're allowed to contribute. So let's say you want to contribute to Lourin's campaign, you can only give him so much money, but you can spread out all your money among whatever candidates you want as long as you don't go beyond their individual limits.
So what is the limit currently?
I do not know that. It goes up as time goes on because, inflation and all that.
Isn't it 1,300?
Oh, that goes up, but
Just
the minimum wage doesn't go with inflation.
$2,900 per election.
There you go.
That's interesting. That's
Okay.
interesting.
2,900 for
and
all candidates for
One candidate. It's $2,900 for one candidate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So make your checks to Lourin payable for $28.99, like Earl Scheib. And real quick before we get to Lourin, do you want to say anything, Tim, about the right to life, Massachusetts Citizens for Life, or Michigan Chamber of Commerce? Either of those FEC cases, because those were
I actually hadn't heard of those. The only other one I heard of was freespeech.org versus FEC, and that was along the same lines as Citizens United.
So Michigan Chamber of Commerce, just real quick, sued to knock down a statute prohibiting it from using general treasury funds to pay for an ad
Oh.
supporting a state candidate.
Yeah.
The Chamber of Commerce argued that because it is a nonprofit corporation, the regulation violated its rights to free speech. But the Supreme Court in that case disagreed because the Michigan Chamber of Commerce was different from the type of group that was involved in FEC versus Massachusetts Citizens for Life, which was a nonprofit that won its case against the FEC. So the court in that case carved out a narrowly defined exception to, it says here from the case itself, the court has carved out a narrowly defined exception to the prohibition of corporations using general treasury funds to pay for express advocacy available to nonprofit corporations that do not accept business corporation funding, which the Chamber of Commerce did. So, Lourin.
I was going to say there's one more thing.
Okay.
When we talk about the Supreme Court cases, the most important Supreme Court case is not Citizens United. It's Buckley versus Vallejo.
Buckley. Yeah.
Every court case that I've looked up in both Connecticut and Maine when I was researching their public financing laws, every challenge has been based on Buckley versus Vallejo. Because Buckley versus Vallejo centers around what the government can and can't do when it comes to regulating campaign finance. Whenever someone tries to set up a campaign finance, a public financing campaign, it always has to be voluntary because of Buckley versus Vallejo. You can't compel candidates to do this. So they have to voluntarily go into the program, and that is entirely because of Buckley versus Vallejo. And the same thing with when it comes to the constitutionality of any like matching funds programs, where if you raise a certain amount, the government will give you a certain amount of money to match what you raised. It all has to be voluntary, and you can't give additional money after you give out that grant. So Buckley versus Vallejo is very important for campaign finance reform.
Mr. Lourin, your thoughts on the FEC and like on this week's dig?
Well, this week's dig topic, I think, is very centered around what we need to get rid of is big money in politics, because we can't do literally anything else until we do that. So when it comes to all the things that we talked about earlier about healthcare reform or enacting policies around education or this or that, we're not going to do it until we get big money out of politics. And we're seeing it play out in real time with Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. You would think that Democrats would be all about doing stuff. Hey, our party's in power. We should, do some of these things. But with those two in particular, in the way they're set up in the Senate, they are beholden to their donors, and it's very clearly, very obvious that they are. So to me, the big issue is bucking filibuster rules and passing some kind of voting rights legislation, and just deal with the consequences of after. But the other big issue is we're seeing play out is campaign finance reform, and I think about was it like 2020 where 40% of the total contributions to candidates came from donors that were able to give $10,000 or more.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
That represents literally less than 100th percent, 0.01% of the U.S. total population. They're having that much influence in our politics.
Mm-hmm.
Sheldon Adelson.
So you're saying that 0.01% of the U.S. population is paying 22% of the total income given to candidates.
It's funding 40% of candidates.
Oh,
damn.
How does that ever cause anything that be remotely close to corruption? I can't see it.
I don't understand. Yeah.
Also,
Yeah,
that's
let's see how it happens.
40% of $14 billion. That was the total amount spent in 2020. by all campaigns is $14 billion.
Yikes.
Yeah. What's his name? Sheldon Adelson, that Republican donor.
No, the
got a
Republican
pretty-
version of George Soros.
Yeah, the Republican George Soros got a pretty good return on his money, donating. He got $700 million in the flip for the Trump tax cuts in 2017, and took that 700 and flipped in $100 million into donations to candidates and campaigns.
Oh,
That's a cool 700% return on investment on $100 million. When you think of it that way. And so there's, by and large, we have a system where one person puts their finger on the scale and dictates what other candidates, even the conversation that candidates have on different topics because of the influence of money.
How is this impacting your campaign against Devin Nunes?
This is, a very interesting question. Devin Nunes is a prolific campaign fundraiser. He's got 11 million cash on hand right now as we speak. I personally don't think I'm actually going to end up running against Devin Nunes. I think he's going after the big fish. I think he's sitting around waiting to announce that he's going to run for president in 2024.
Are you fucking serious?
I am. He raises a lot of money, and none of it, very little of it, comes from actually in the district. It's all out of state money.
Oh, Jesus.
And the funny story, back in, this would be like July, August. I announced my campaign in June. So July, August, I was approached. I got an email from somebody and had a conversation with someone, and they were like, "Hey, we looked at we saw your website, and we heard you on this candidate forum, and we like what you have to say. How strong is your position on this health topic?" It's like, it's my number one issue. It's the thing that spurred me into the race is trying to fix our healthcare system. Well, what if where can we get some ground on that? We have a couple folks who are really interested in you. That's one aspect of your campaign that they're not so hot on. And then I stopped replying back, but it's just like, it's already there, and it's from these random people that, I represent such and such coalition of whoever.
How
groups
strong
you've never heard
are
of.
you? Are you willing to whore yourself out just a little bit?
Yeah.
Your closing thought on campaign finance reform.
So there's a big problem with campaign finance reform in that we're sort of stuck in one place. The Supreme Court has said over and over again that you can't regulate how much money people give to campaigns, and you can't regulate how much money those campaigns spend. So you're left with only a few options. You subvert the campaign finance system with clean election laws in which candidates can only participate voluntarily, or you focus on disclosure requirements where PACs and super PACs and campaigns have to disclose who their contributors are, who their donors are.
None of that dark money.
Yeah.
Them darky dollars.
That big house money.
You got to go after dark money. You got to go after collusion, which, PACs aren't supposed to collude with campaigns, but they fucking do all the time. If you ever want to see a great example of that, back in the day, Stephen Colbert started a super PAC, and he ran for president.
Of course he did.
You saw the interplay between a campaign and a PAC, what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. And what they're not allowed to do is very little.